This week's Sedra is EMOR, and the Rebbe, when he was preparing Hayoim Yoim, which is a kind of diary for Hasidic sayings, one for every day of the year, he quoted, I'm going to apologize once for my cough, and then after that, please bear with me. I have a lingering cough every time I get the flu. So in the Hayoim Yoim, the Rebbe quotes his father-in-law saying that there are certain Maimorim that the Rebbeim spoke, which you have to learn, which clean the air. That's the language, and it recommends that they should be learned every few years. And I was once sitting with Rabbi Aryl Serebransky, Oliver Sholem, in Melbourne, and he told me that just as there was some Maimorim like that, there was some Sikhs like that. And he said that, and he told me that the Sikha that we're going to learn tonight was one of those, and he used to learn it every 2 or 3 years, and he lived to be 90 something, so every 2 or 3 years he learned it often. And so we're going to learn that again tonight. I'm giving you that introduction because I see from my Sefer that I did it with the Shia in 1995, 2002, 2010, 2013, 2006. So we haven't done it for a few years, but if anyone remembers it well, you can take over. But I've made some notes recently, so I'm more up to date than you are. And this is a sikha for the purpose of the tape. It's volume Chofzayin 27 of Likutei Sikhas, and it's on page 158. So we're going to discuss another spiritual energy tonight. We've discussed a few. One is Betochen, one is Tshuva, one is Avos Yisrael, which is what we learned last week, or relearned again last week. And tonight we're going to be talking about an energy which is partly spiritual, partly physical, and that's the energy of speech. The Sedra is called EMOR. EMOR means to say. It's a softer term than diber, which is another word used frequently in the Torah when in talking about saying. EMOR is a much gentler word, and it's used to describe this energy that we're going to be talking about. Now, I just want to prove to you that it is an energy that we're going to be speaking about, because let me prove to you that Avos Yisrael is an energy. The fact that you force yourself or teach yourself or train yourself to perform the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael, no matter how difficult it is, like we learned last week, because it's very difficult to love your neighbor. It's very easy to love a Yid you've never met in Israel, but the neighbor who's driving you crazy is much more difficult to love. But to prove to you how important this is as an energy, these are the words that we start our davening with from our Siddur, the Chabad Siddur, Tchilas Hashem Siddur. We start with these words: Hareini Mekabel Olai, Mitzvahs Aseh Shel Ve'ahavta L'Reacha Kamocha. I'm going to translate. It's appropriate to accept upon myself the mitzvah, the positive mitzvah of loving your neighbor like yourself. Now, you have to understand when we say that before we daven. What do we do? What's davening? Davening is 3 steps, really. It's praising Hashem, it's thanking Hashem for what we have, and it's asking Hashem for our needs. So you might want to say, what's that got to do with taking upon yourself the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael? And the answer is that those 2 things have to be connected, otherwise we wouldn't be saying it. In other words, you energize your requests to Hashem by the giving or the undertaking, the practicing of the mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew like yourself. So we're really saying, God, give me what I want, and I'm paying for it by making sure that I treat other Jews in a particular manner. So you are actually defining the energy that you are relying on to have what you are asking for come true. And as I said last week, it's not a beautiful way to teach this, but there's obviously a big what's in it for me. The truth is that by ignoring what's in it for me and helping somebody else, because loving your neighbor like yourself involves helping your neighbor, involves doing for your neighbor in priority to yourself, we are really saying that that's an energy which ultimately gives us ultimately gets us what we want. Now that's not that's an ugly way of looking at it, but that is the dynamic, whichever way you look at it. There is an energy of Avos Yisrael, which if you perform that energy of Avos Yisrael, then that which you daven for is more likely to be granted to you. And in particular, we're talking about utilizing as that energy speech, because that's what davening is. You should know that ideally you don't daven in your mind. Ideally, you're supposed to say the words. So you'll often see religious Jews who'll sit and their lips are moving. Their lips are moving because that is enough of an action to qualify as speech. But this energy that we're talking about is an energy in speech. And there is a positive side to that and a negative side to it. You should know that the positive side to it is when we speak words of Torah. And we have a mitzvah for that. In the Shema it says, "V'dibarta bom," and you will speak of them. And all the commentators explain what's that mean. It means that when a Jew speaks words of Torah, learns Torah, speaks words of Torah, he is using speech in a way which is kodesh, holy. Now, when a Jew isn't speaking words of Torah, he is using speech at the best level in a manner which is profane. That means not kodesh, but not bad. But the moment it goes lower than that, and it goes into what we define, what we call lashon hara, and I'm going to define that in the halachas of that in a moment, and the speech becomes negative, it becomes, the energy of that negative speech is very powerful and very dangerous. It's dangerous to, let me quote you a Gemara. There's a Gemara that says that when 2 people speak lashon hara about a third person, 3 people die. That's what it says, die. What does that mean? very difficult to understand. You can understand that the speaker has done something wrong, and therefore deserves maybe to die, whatever that means. The listener, okay, also he's guilty. But what about the poor guy that's got nothing to do with the conversation?
The casting.
Huh?
The casting.
You're talking about a third guy who's not even in the room, and you're talking negatively about him, and he has to be included in this death sentence. So what does that mean? And how is this energy so powerful and so negative that he is not only affected, but affected as badly as the man who's doing the talking and the man who's doing the listening? And you have to know what a Yetzer Hara this is, in case you've never been truthful enough with yourself to examine it. The Gemara describes Lashon Hara as being a snake with poison, with honey on its fangs. Right? It's delicious. You sit together with people, and you know the old story that this saying is also taken from Torah. Whatever the nations of the world have taken from Torah Gesundheit, we're very happy that they have it. But it's said that if you sit with a friend and you talk words of Torah, that's the highest level. If you don't talk words of Torah, but you talk ordinary conversation, that's the next level. The highest Torah is the highest level. Ordinary conversation, no. Then ideas, if you talk ideas, that's the next level. But the lowest level is to talk about people. Why? Because the moment you and I start talking about people, we're going to talk about this energy of talking well and talk positively and talking negatively. Talking negatively, don't tell me I didn't hear you. Talking negatively is very destructive, as we're going to see. So, let me give you some. So, Lashon Hara, let's define the term and let's define the halakha. Lashon Hara means speaking badly about another person behind their back. Not in front of them, behind their back. And the issa, the what is forbidden, is not lying about this person. If you're lying, if what you're saying isn't true, that's not this mitzvah. That's not this avera. That's an avera called moitzi shem ra. Moitzi shem ra means that you're telling a story about somebody and it's a lie. Maybe that's worse, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody behind their back, something negative about that person that is true. That is 100% true. So in ordinary civil law, if you want to defame somebody, truth and public interest is a defense. There's no such defense. There are exceptions to Lashon Hara. If you want a business reference, the person is obliged to tell the truth. If you want a reference on a shidduch, the person is obliged to tell the truth. But if you're just chatting and you point out that this guy, you happen to know that he ripped off so-and-so, or you happen to know that, he did this or that, that is absolutely forbidden. Even though it's true, and even if it's in the public interest, it's still forbidden. So, what's the big problem with this Lashon Hara? So, I'll give you a couple of examples. There was a very great tzaddik nicknamed the Chofetz Chaim. Chofetz Chaim wrote Sfarim. His speciality was Lashon Hara. This is what he wrote a book on it. He wrote. He was a very, very holy tzaddik, and this was the area that he specialized in for himself. He opened a yeshiva, and in that yeshiva he used to teach Lashon Hara in very great detail. In fact, there's a story told about they had a Farbrengen once for or Tish as they called it, and it was Simchas Torah, and he allowed the Bochrim to have a l'chaim or two or three, and one Bocher had too much to drink, and when the Rebbe was leaving the zal, the room, this Bocher ran ahead and stood at the doorway, and he was a bit drunk, and he had a lot of chutzpah. He was a good boy, and he said to the when the Chavetz Chaim got to the door, he said, "Rebbe, I'm not going to let you through until you promise me a place next to you in Olam Haba." So the Rebbe stops, and he looks at him. He looks at him hard, and he said, "If you promise, if you take a neder tonight, now, that never again in your life, by word, by flicker of the eye, to ever speak Lashon Hara, ever again, you'll have a place next to me in Olam Haba." Now this Bacher was a good boy, and it's a big ask, right? He's drunk or not, it's a big ask. So he's standing there and he's trying to think, can he possibly make a neder like that and stick to it? Can he? So the Rebbe waits, and then he brushes by him, and he said, "You stood at the gates of Gan Eden and you wouldn't go in." This is how powerful Lashon Hara is. It's a serious issue. So, and they once asked, a guy once came to the same tzaddik to the Chavetz Chaim, and he said to him, "Rebbe, I spoke very bad Lashon Hara. I need a tikkun. I need you to tell me something to fix it." And the Rebbe said, "Take a pillow made of down and take it up on the roof and smash it against the chimney until the feathers all blow away. And then go and pick up the feathers." In other words, this is the problem with Lashon Hara, that one person speaks, another person speaks it. You can't reclaim it. In case the point isn't clear yet, although it ought to be, I can tell you that when I first married Anne, 55 years ago, whenever it was, she had a sister who was then 10, and she went to Askham, and my in-laws used to invite us for dinner a lot in the very early days because they're probably skeptical about Anne's cooking and mine. And so we were there, and she came home, my little sister-in-law came home from school, and one of her friend's mothers had died. It was said that she had committed suicide, she put her head in the oven, wasn't clear what it was. But my little sister-in-law said, "We know what happened, all the kids know. My girlfriend's father murdered her." And my mother-in-law was outraged and said, "How can you talk like that? And you go wash your mouth out." And she said, no, 100% murdered her. Right? Now, I mean, it was a little 10-year-old kid talking, but this man lives in the eastern suburbs, and I saw him in Double Bay for 50 years after that, and I swear to you that whatever you say, every time I saw this man walking along the street, I thought, there goes a murderer. At some level, Lashon Hara is so powerful, and this was probably a lie. But even if it was true, it's terrible. Right? So, okay. The question is,
what about opinion on, for example, now we have so many opinions in Israel about politicians who say this and this. So is opinion...
There are exceptions to the halakha where it's in the public interest, where the kind of thing that you're talking about. Certainly, it's not Lashon Hara. But if it doesn't fall within those exceptions, it's forbidden. slowly.
החיים והמוות
Yes.
ביד הלשון.
Right.
You know what that means?
So translate.
The life and the death is in the hand of your tongue.
That's right. And that's right. Because it is such a powerful energy, and for good and for bad. We're going to learn it can be for good just as well as for bad. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Speech as an energy, first of all, it's the exclusive domain of humanity. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Animals signal to each other, but they don't speak to each other. An animal doesn't define an idea in speech. An animal grunts and makes signals, and maybe those signals can be very sophisticated. I have a grandchild who found out that instead, when you get a line of ants in the kitchen or your laundry or wherever in your house, you get a plague of ants. You know they're in a line and they're all busily going one way and they're going the other. And you can buy all sorts of stuff at the shop to put them there to kill them. And he found that if you take your finger and squash 20, 30, 40 of them in a row, they're gone the next day. So they obviously have a level of communication, and they obviously have a level of indicating that this is a danger zone and that don't go there. But they don't have speech. We are the only things in creation that have speech. And that speech, you have to understand the energy of that speech is an energy of revelation. It's tempting to say creation. It's not creation. I'm going to explain why, but it is revelation. What's the difference? When you go to the Torah and you see the creative process in Sheshis Yimei Bereshis, in the 6 days of creation, you have Vayomer Hashem, that Hashem said, Yehi Oya, let there be light, Vayehi Oya, and there was light. It's speech, speech, speech. All the creation of the 6 days of creation, when you read the Torah, you will see that it is Hashem speaking. So what does that mean? Hashem doesn't have a mouth, he doesn't have a vocal cords. It means that it is a form of revelation of something which is hitherto hidden. Why isn't it creative of itself? Because the creative process comes from Hashem blowing, not speaking. Blowing is internal, it's panemius. Speaking is chitzonis, it's external, in the sense that, so when, we've talked about this many times, when you go through the creative process in the 6 days of creation, everything is Hashem speaking, except man. With man, and everything in creation is one step. Hashem spoke, and that's the answer. And it came into being. We say in davening, Baruch Sha'ama V'hoyo Olam, that Hashem spoke and the world existed, bang. But when it comes to humans, as we've been through this many times, there are 2 steps. Hashem first of all gathered the ground together, the Gashmias, and he breathed into that Gashmias, a Nishmas Chaim, as it's called, a breath of life, and suddenly man was created. 2 steps, Gashmias and Ruchnias. Everything else is just Gashmias. Now, so the enlivening process was the blowing, but the revealing of what was previously hidden is the speaking. Now that's the code that you have to understand before we go any further with Lashon Hara. The code of this is that speech reveals that which is hidden. So in a human being, it's tried to say that our thoughts are hidden. Sure, it betray a bit in your expressions on your face and body movements and so on, but fundamentally, you don't know what somebody else is thinking, but until they speak. And when they speak, they reveal that which is concealed. Okay, now, that revelation of that which was hitherto concealed is an energy. It's an energy as sure as other energies. Let me give you let's take a physical energy. Gravity. Scientists know nothing about gravity, you should know. Can't measure gravity, don't understand it. We understand that bodies attract. We understand that the bigger the body, the bigger the attraction. But we have no way of explaining the attraction. We have no way of measuring the attraction. We have no way of understanding how there is something between the sun and Venus, something between Earth and Uranus. There's nothing there that we can measure. There's nothing there that we can test. There's nothing there and yet we know that there is a force of gravity. Now there are and that's a Gashmias force. That's a physical force. Now there are spiritual forces, equally incomprehensible, equally unmeasurable by scientific method, and because you can't measure it, you can't say which is more powerful. But speech is one of those energies, and the speech for good can build and enhance and create, as we see in the 6 days of creation. And negative speech can tear down and destroy as sure as acid can. It can, if you have bad parenting, everybody knows that children can be negatively affected for their whole lives. If you tell a child that he's hopeless and he's stupid and he's dumb and he's clumsy and he's this and he's that and he's that and that, that child will suffer the whole life believing that at some level or another. It's a therapist's dream. On the other hand, if you speak positive speech to a child in terms of parenting, Tversky is very big on this. There's Tversky, he's now dead, but he was a very famous psychiatrist in America. He's a linear descendant from the Chernobyl Rebbe, from Yid, and he explains that with children, the greatest parenting gift you can give a child is to build up their positive self-image. So if the child's in the kitchen and he spills milk all over the floor, or brings the eggs, your mother says, bring me the eggs from the fridge or the pantry or whatever, and he brings the eggs and he drops them on the floor and all the eggs break. Now, there are two ways you can deal with this. First of all, the action can't be excused, because he has to be careful with the eggs. So there's one way of dealing with it, is to say you're a lazy, clumsy, dumb kid. How can I give you a job to do and you can't even bring the eggs from there to there, and that kid's going to grow up a cripple. Or you can say, Yankee, you drop the eggs, and I have to tell you that you're so much better than that. You're so much better able to look after the eggs than simply dropping them. It's not like you. And then he knows that he's done wrong, but he doesn't feel crippled. He doesn't feel belittled. On the contrary, he hears that he's really a very smart kid, and really it shouldn't have happened to him. And really, it won't happen to him anymore, because he's such a smart kid. He's going to be careful. So speech has I'm using really weak, silly examples to make it easy, but speech has a positive, and we know that from ordinary secular literature and ordinary secular experience, that football coaches, tennis coaches, sports coaches, they give their people pep talks. What do they give them a pep talk for? Because that pep talk carries an energy which which does influence the players to play in a certain way or to a certain standard. On the other hand, if a coach got up and started to call all the players names and telling them that they're lazy, they haven't trained enough, they've done this wrong and that right, what chance have they got of winning? They've got no chance at all. So the question is, are we mechuyev, are we obligated? How are we obligated to speak? Not are we. How are we obligated to speak? First of all, most people would spend their lives, I think everybody would agree, without this even occurring to them. Most people they get up in the morning, they work through their day trying to dodge as many bullets as possible. They go to bed at night hoping that tomorrow is going to be easier for them, and they don't consider that they have been given a specific gift in creation, the gift of speech, and that with that comes a very important, heavy responsibility, because it can be used in your 60, 70, 80, 120 years, whatever it is, to build many people and build much goodness in the world, or it can be used to tear down people and create evil. And how many people even know that they have that opportunity and responsibility? And let alone know to what extent we're going to be talking, because they have no conception of the power of that energy. Okay. Now, I'm going to try and explain something that's difficult to explain and difficult to make das. There is a concept with speech of a gilui, of a revelation. That's what we were talking about. We're talking about blowing, that Hashem blew. That's the creative process. Speech is a revealing process. When you speak well, you reveal good. When you speak badly, you reveal a tearing down and bad. Why is that? So there is a concept in Kabbalah and in Chassidus that we bring things into Gashmias. Now you have to understand the koyach, the power of what we're talking about here. Let me give you an example first so that you'll understand where this is going. The Mogged of Mezrich, who was the Rebbe of the Alter Rebbe who wrote the Tanya and the Shulchan Aruch, was once learning a very difficult matter in Torah and couldn't solve the problem and worked on it for a long time until he finally did. And when he finally did, he went to a different town a month or two later, or whenever it was, and he found a fairly simple Yid who was learning and came to this passage, and the Yid solved the problem fairly quickly. And he, the great Mogged of Mezrich, he was the Lubavitcher Rebbe of the generation, he was absolute Tzaddik Hadoya, went to his Rebbe, who was the Baal Shem Tov, who was Gaon of Gaonim, and said he didn't understand how this simple guy got what he struggled for so long, and he was known to be a genius. So the Baal Shem Tov explained to him that until he solved the problem, that problem remained in Ruchnis, in spirituality. Once he solved the problem and brought it into Gashmias, it was then available for everybody and much easier. And you get this in physical things. I mean, for example, a marshal, one of my teachers once told me, was that, until, I can't remember his name, but somebody ran a 4-minute mile. Who was he?
Bannister.
Huh? Bannister, Roger Bannister. So until then, nobody could run a 4-minute mile. It was impossible. No, it was absolutely unheard of, impossible. Nobody could get to it. Roger Bannister ran the 4-minute mile, and within 5 minutes, hundreds of athletes had been running the 4-minute mile, right? Because a new reality, a new spiritual reality is brought into Gashmias, and once that's brought into Gashmias, it's available. And it's not only available, it's there. So if it's good, if it's for good, it's available for good. So when the Mogadiv Mezrich solves this problem in Torah, it's then available for everybody. And even if he's not broadcasting it, they'll find it themselves. But if it's for bad, you bring an infection into Gashmias. You bring a virus into Gashmias. And that's what happens when you speak Lashon Hara, when you speak badly about somebody else. You introduce into the avir, into the air, a spiritual virus. And it multiplies. It's very robust. Multiplies very quickly. There's a person that used to work for me for a period of work for us for a period of time, and she left, and somebody informed us that she was a lesbian and she was getting married to some woman. We didn't see her again for years, and but everybody in the office knew that she was a lesbian, and everybody that used to work with her, she was a registration clerk, so all the people that she had to go to the land titles office and the courts, and they all knew she was a lesbian, right? And then one day I see her walking down the street hand in hand with her husband, who's a male, and I questioned somebody else about it, and they said, I don't know what you're talking about. So, not a lesbian, never was a lesbian. But everybody knew she was a lesbian. Why? Because one person informed us secretly that she was a lesbian who didn't know what she was talking about. And that's what happens. You've all shared this experience that people will talk, and that piece of information was not Lashon Hara. That's Moitzi Shemra, because that was a lie. But when it's true, the virus is, I'm just explaining the strength of the virus, not the effect of the damage. The effect of the damage, when it's true, is that it's a giloi, it's a revelation of a fault that needn't have been apparent until it's articulated in speech. Now this has got to be understood very clearly, because by speaking negatively about somebody when you're talking the truth, you are revealing a negative in that person. You're bringing into Gashmias a virus which feeds off itself and multiplies of itself and is destructive for destruction's sake. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't go and gather all those feathers from the pillow. You can't. You can't get it back. That's the massive problem with this. You can't go and find the 267,000 or 267 people who've heard this Lashon Hara and say, I'm sorry, I told you wrong. Because you can't. It's out there, and once it's out there, it's that fault that person has suddenly becomes available to everybody. And prior to that, it wasn't. So let's pretend that somebody has an addiction to chocolate. And no one knows about it. I'm using a really stupid example. No one knows about it. No one knows that he's got an addiction to chocolate. And you happen to find out that he's got an addiction to chocolate. And let's say that we decide that's Lashon Hara, although it probably isn't. And you tell your friends that he's got an addiction to chocolate, and the fellow has an addiction to chocolate. All of a sudden, that fault of his becomes real, and he's judged for it. We're going to come to that in a moment. He's judged for it in terms of Hashem judging him. Now, we have to understand what Hashem judging means. It doesn't mean that he's going to get the cane because Hashem's the saddest and wants to punish somebody. It means that there are consequences in Gashmias for that being revealed. And those consequences wouldn't exist in Gashmias if they weren't revealed. And Hashem, as it were, is kaviyachol, as it were, forced to bring those consequences on it because we have a moral code which involves reward and punishment and free choice. So if this person is choosing a negative, but nobody knows about it, the consequences are not as necessary as they are the moment it's revealed. The moment it's revealed, it becomes Gashmis. The moment it's Gashmis, it's out there. And it has a consequence. And you are the one, or you or your friend, we are the ones who create that consequence for this guy. So not only is this not only is this not loving your fellow Jew like yourself, this is actually causing harm. And that's what the Gemara is talking about, that the three people are harmed. The person talking, the person listening, and the person being spoken about, because his fault is being brought into Gashmias, and all of a sudden he's vulnerable for that fault at a different level of consequence than if you hadn't brought it into revelation, into existence. Now, these are all very subtle things, and if you talk to the man in the street, he's not going to know what you're talking about. But you know what we're talking about. First of all, you've all learned enough Torah to know that. Second of all, we're going through the Rebbe's Sikha in detail, and the Rebbe is explaining all of this. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. But the fact is that there is an energy. It can be negative or positive. If it's negative, by articulating it, you are bringing it something from Ruchnius into Gashmias, and that's got negative consequences. And you are actually harming your fellow man. You may not know it. So when people speak at the dinner table about I'm your uncle and it's beautiful, it's juicy, it's gossip, especially if, you take a guy who sets himself up as being very moral or very, very proper or very, very something, and you suddenly find out that he's got clay feet. It's delicious to spread that because this guy's such a hypocrite, and you want everybody to know that he's a hypocrite. It's delicious telling everybody that he's a hypocrite, but you're really doing harm. You're really doing harm to this guy, because until you bring it out, nobody knows. While nobody knows, it's not in Gashmias. While it's not in Gashmias, he doesn't suffer consequences necessarily.
So if you tell him straight, it's okay?
Privately straight. Okay, now let's. I'm glad you asked me, because it's the next note on my page. On the other hand, we have a mitzvah. You have to know this. It's an obligation to criticize your friend when he's doing bad. Now, that's under certain circumstances, right? First of all, the Gemara says that you don't criticize somebody unless you believe that there is a chance that he's going to listen to you. If there's no chance that he's going to listen to you, it's a waste of time. Not only a waste of time, but it doesn't work. But if there is a chance that he's going to listen to you, you have a constructive obligation to criticize him and explain to him where he's gone wrong. But the question is, how do you do it? Are you going to say to him, you are a thieving son of a bitch that you robbed me, or are you going to go to him and say, I may be wrong, but I suspect that you've done this and that, and you've done that to me. It's hurt me, and I'm sharing this with you because we're not allowed to bear a grudge, and I think you should pay for it if that's appropriate, right? And you have an obligation to do that, but you have an obligation to do it nicely. What does it mean nicely? Constructively, in a positive manner, so that you both grow from that experience. It's no good that you grow from the experience and put him down, because now you're doing exactly, you're harming actually ultimately yourself, because you are invoking that negative energy which is going to come back to you. You know, this probably has no place here, but since you use the word cursed, I'm going to tell you something that in Kabbalah, you know, Jews are very careful not to curse another Yid. Right? Why? Because it says in Kabbalah that that energy that you are using with your mouth, with your speech, to curse that person, understand that it's going to work. That person is going to suffer a negative as a result of your curse. The stronger your neshama, it's like with a bracha. You give somebody a bracha, the stronger the neshama, the bigger the bracha. You go to a rebbe and you ask for a bracha, oh, that's a very big koyach. But you should know every Jew has a power to give a bracha. And we don't know who's got a bigger power and a smaller power because we don't know the power of the neshama. Equally, every Jew has a power to curse. But what happens is, we have a saying like this, that the person who blesses is blessed. Say it in Hebrew. The person who blesses is blessed, right? The person who curses gets cursed. So we are very careful not to curse somebody because it's going to work, but it's also going to work on you. And this is the energy we're talking about. This is a very powerful energy that is there and can equally be harnessed for good. So, as Ronin asks, if you have a genuine reason to criticize somebody, where the purpose of that criticism is for him to do tshuva and repair the situation and grow, you've got an obligation to do it. If it's just to slander him or make fun of him, and for example, it's another thing that we're forbidden to do. You're forbidden to shame somebody in public. You should know there are people who've chosen death. I'm serious, tzaddikim, who've chosen death rather than shame somebody in public. I can remember in yeshiva there was a story. I don't know if it's true or not, but there was a story that went around for many years. This is long before Gimel Tammuz, before the Rebbe died, where we had somebody collecting from Israel, and he was farbringing with everybody, and they brought in a cake, and he had a piece of the cake, and I wasn't there. This has been repeated to me, so it could be a urban myth. But he took the cake, and then he started to eat the cake with his hands and feet and with his mouth, and people tried to get the cake, and he took the cake and he ate their cake and his cake, and when it was all over, somebody, I don't remember whether it was Rabbi Philman or somebody, asked him, what happened there? Right? And he said that whoever cooked the cake, and we hadn't employed cook in yeshiva in those days, whoever cooked the cake must have put salt in instead of sugar, and it was unedible, and he didn't want her to lose her job. Now this is somebody who is, rather than see her shamed, he ate this disgusting, huge amount of cake and was prepared to have everybody think that he was a glutton and a pig to eat like this with his hands and feet and deny everybody else the cake, just so that she shouldn't be shamed. So that's how important, how much more so if you shame somebody in public verbally. You're as good as killing that person. Never recover from it. Okay. Anyway, just at a deeper level, let's understand this. What happened? We're going to be learning more about this in the next couple of weeks because Shavuos is coming. What happened on Shavuos, on Matan Torah? We are in the period at the moment between Yetzias Mitzrayim and the period of Sphira, where we're counting the days to the giving of the Torah. And when we got the Torah, there was a Kiddush, there was a revolution, there was a new reality created. That new reality that was created was that we, Am Yisrael, chosen people is a very bad translation. Am Segula doesn't mean a chosen people, it means precious. So we are precious to the extent that we were given an additional responsibility to the rest of humanity. What's that additional responsibility? Morality. Am Yisrael was given the task at Mount Sinai for morality. Until then, there was no such thing as morality. There was civilization at some level, barbaric civilization, but the concept of right and wrong is a concept based on Ratzon Hashem as opposed to the lack of Ratzon Hashem. That's morality. And we introduced it. It's our job to be a light to the nations, as it says. Throughout history, we have been the flag bearers of morality. That's the reason there's so much anti-Semitism. It's another share. But morality is the difference between good and bad. What's good? Ratzon Hashem. What's bad? The opposite of Ratzon Hashem. When the essence of morality, if you analyze the essence of morality down to learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, there is this simple underlying plank. It's not difficult, it's just difficult to do. We are expected to prioritize the needs of others above our needs. That's what morality is. We don't steal. Why not? Because he needs his property more than we need his property. We need his property to be available to him more than to us. That's why we don't steal. That's why we don't cheat. Doing another Jew a favor is much better. It creates much more spiritual positive energy than gratifying yourself. That's the basis of morality. Now, this energy that we're talking about encapsulates that basic principle. If you use your speech to build your friend, to build your child, to build your relationship with your wife, to build your relationship with your community, then you're using your speech in a way which is kodesh. That's EMOR. If you use it to tear down, to criticize, to spoil, to terrorize, to cause damage, then you're doing the opposite. You're derelict in your duty. I'm derelict in my duty. I'm not talking to you. We are derelict in our duty as Jews, because we are supposed to be the shluchim of morality. And to being the shluchim of morality, our job is to build Ruchnius into Gashmius and elevate Gashmius into Ruchnius, not destroy anything. And to do this, finally, it's a whole shir on its own, but let's just do it quickly. We have an obligation, very difficult to understand until you learn this properly, to don lekaf zchus. That means to judge what's l'kafskus? To judge favorably, to judge. And understand what this means, that when we have an obligation to don l'kafskus, to judge a person favorably, it means that there's a signal there which is no good. You're not going to judge a man favorably for doing the good. The obligation is to judge favorably when he's doing not good, right? If you see the shliach of the city driving on Shabbos, right, you are obliged, if you know that the shliach keeps Shabbos and he's serious about it, and he's driving, he must have a reason. His wife's sick, he's going to a hospital, he's going to save a life. He's doing something which pushes off the Shabbos. If you see Chaim Yankel, who keeps nothing, driving on Shabbos, you're not expected to say, oh, this guy is only driving on Shabbos because he's driving his wife to the hospital or he's going to visit his... Then you're an idiot. Nobody says that. There's no Torah that says you've got to behave like an idiot. So when is this obligation to judge favorably? When a person is doing something obviously wrong. So if he's doing something obviously wrong and you're not an idiot, where is this obligation to judge favorably coming from? You can see that he's doing wrong. So where is the obligation to judge favorably coming from? This is assuming you're judging at all, by the way. Judging it on itself is a very big problem. Pirkei Avot, sure. So, what are you judging the kafskus? You are so it's explained in Torah, it's explained in Chassidus that you can't judge until you're in the man's place, right? In his place. And that's usually learned at the simple level, which is good, that you're not in his physical place. So, for example, the Rebbe brings the example in this sikha that I'm learning with you, that a man who sits in the marketplace on a street corner is going to have different temptations than a man who sits and learns Torah in a yeshiva. If he goes for his daily walk on Bondi Beach and sees the wobbling, beautiful ladies walking by him, he's going to have a different set of tests than a guy who sits in yeshiva. You know, I can tell you. So, what does it mean that you can't judge him until you're in his place? If you don't sit on street corners or walk down Bondi Beach and don't have his test, the question is, if you did, would you behave any better? And you probably wouldn't. Maybe you'd behave worse. But then it's explained in Chassidus beyond this sikha, from the Rebbe, that place is not just physical. There's emotional place. There's spiritual place. Until you are satisfied that you know what it was like to grow up in his family, with his parents, with his financial position, with his political position, with his popularity at school, with whether he was beaten up or lauded, until you have shared his nature and nurture, how do you know how you'd behave? So that's what it means to don l'kafskus. Now, don l'kafskus, to judge favorably, is a prelude to how you speak or you don't speak about that person. Because if you judge that person favorably when he's doing something wrong, by understanding that if you were in his shoes, you might do worse, you're not going to be so quick to talk about him in such a negative way. But then the Rebbe explains something much harder, that if he has greater temptations than you do you know why he's got greater temptations than you do? Because he's got a bigger neshama. Because if he has the bigger temptations, Hashem gives him the wherewithal to deal with those temptations. Why don't you have those temptations? Because you haven't got a neshama big enough to deal with it. So Hashem doesn't give you those tests. So it's almost the point that the guy that you are about to slander and talk Lashon Hara about and destroy his life and destroy his family's life is probably a neshama bigger than yours, bigger than mine. Otherwise we wouldn't have the test to fail for which you and I are now talking about. So in summary, this energy of Lashon Hara is a hugely potent energy. It's one we throw away every 5 minutes of every day, and it's a really serious responsibility. And I blush to tell you that the best way to learn this is selfishly, because if you understand that a person who gives a bracha is blessed and a person that curses is cursed, you're going to be much more careful about the Lashon Hara that you say, because you are bringing into Gashmias a virus which is going to affect you. So, I finished. I'm turning it off because so you can ask whatever you like.
I'm just saying, Robert Wolf once told me that before he speaks, he thinks 3 times.
You what?
He thinks 3 times before he says a word. Normally, a person who is wise thinks twice before he says something. And people who are not that one, they speak,
Kol hakavod. If he does, it's fantastic. That's what we should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not everyone does 3 times.
Huh?
He makes sure that what he says.
Fantastic. Yeah.